we'll get started with a little singing. See if others will join us in the interim. Hello. How lovely. Here we are. And welcome on this fine Monday rainy day. We will dispel the darkness with the light of Torah as we gather together today. And I want to, for those who just joined in the last couple of minutes, a mazel tov to Kara Rosenberg on becoming bat mitzvah. She is now an adult again, and we just celebrated this past Shabbat, and what a joy. Kara, I didn't ask you this in advance, but I hope it's okay. I would love to share your Devar Torah with this group.
Oh, of course.
And it pertains to our topic for today. Very much the themes of your Devar Torah, I think, would be a wonderful post-class reading. So we'll get that shared because it speaks to the heart of this class's theme. On the topic of practice and mitzvot, the mitzvah. So let's begin with our bracha. Barbara, are you going to throw that in the chat box? Great. And we're going to say our blessing. La'asok b'divrei Torah is how it ends. We'll say this together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidashanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, eternal one, our God, master of all teachers, who has made us holy with your mitzvot, commanding us to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. And this too is a wonderful place to pause along the journey of this learning session, because here we have a blessing that says we are commanded, we are mitzvahed to engross ourselves in words of Torah. And so the action here, the mitzvah, is the study of Torah. So we jump in with our topic. Religion is often portrayed, and certainly on the outside of Judaism is often portrayed as a body of ideas or testaments of faith. Yet much of Jewish tradition places a central focus on practice. And that is what we are here to talk about, practice. In this section, we're going to explore this emphasis on practice. What does Jewish practice encompass? Why should practice be important to a religious tradition? What are the implications for faith if religion is oriented around practice? what is the relationship between our feelings, intentions, and sincerity and our external actions? And what is the difference between obligation and autonomy? So lots of kind of big questions to frame our conversation. And in this particular class, we're exploring the category of Jewish practice known as mitzvah or mitzvah, translated literally as commandment. What parts of life does the system of mitzvot encompass? What do mitzvot accomplish? What is their relationship to faith, which is going to be our primary question here, and to the goals of religion in the world? Some of you may have heard these words, na'aseh v'nishma, which come straight from our Torah, and they mean na'aseh, we will do, v'nishma, and we will understand, we will comprehend. And this is the teaching that the Israelites got at base camp of Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandments were coming, and Moses was about to climb his Everest, and the Israelites get this teaching, na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will comprehend. And the rabbis have understood that to mean that actions lead to understanding. Often we're taught that we can understand something and then we will act. But in so many ways, the Jewish religion is reversed. First you do, then you come to understand. And we're really going to explore this in depth and from different angles today. So put in the chat box. Let's explore just kind of first impression. When I hear the word mitzvah, I think of what? And just put a word down. Put a phrase, a sentence. Good deed, goodness. Good deed, goodness, doing good. Okay, lots of good. What else? Praise, commandments, intentionality. Again, good deed. Nice. Blessing. 613. Absolutely. And we're actually going to look at the source, or one of the sources of how we count to 613 from the Torah. You must do proactive endeavor for good. I like that. So to kick us off tonight, we've asked two of our esteemed chevruta, our esteemed learners, to share a couple of minutes on a mitzvah that they have integrated into their lives. We didn't give too many boundaries here, but just a mitzvah that they brought into their lives and how they came to bring that mitzvah in. And so I'm going to call on Willa Bruckner and then Howard Brown to share a couple of words here.
So I'm going to talk about our family's Friday night Shabbat ritual. It's something that started 37 years ago when Jeff was studying for his conversion. And the rabbi we were studying with asked us to 2 Fridays in a row to set the table on Friday evening with a white tablecloth, light the candles, do the kiddush, hamotzi, and it's become part of our week every week. It's changed over the years. The white tablecloth pretty much is gone, But we've added so many other things. We say the blessings for the children. Jeff says the Eshet Chayil for me. We've added a reading for Jeff. We do a reading about the joy of Shabbat and celebrating with family. We do a prayer for the state of Israel. We have, in more recent years, added a prayer for peace. We give everybody at the table an opportunity to share something about their week. Then we name the people who are in need of healing in our lives. And then we spend a little time talking about the portion of the week. And the ritual comes with us no matter where we go. We have a Shabbat bag that has wine glasses and salt and all the other things that we need. We throw in a bottle of wine and some challah rolls and take it with us on the road if we need to. And a couple of years ago, when I was in the hospital and for several days and couldn't have any visitors, Jeff and my two sons got on Zoom so that I could do Friday night Shabbat with them while I was in the hospital. I'll just say one other thing quickly about what the ritual has done in our lives. Our younger son, who always rebelled on Friday night about doing our little rituals, when he got into high school, he would say to his non-Jewish friends, if you come over to our house for Friday night dinner, my parents will give you a blessing. So we would have kind of a steady stream of kids coming over to our house on Friday night for dinner. And a few months ago, his girlfriend, now fiance, gave him a 30th birthday surprise party. A bunch of his high school buddies were there. And one of them came up to us and asked us if all of us could get together for a Shabbat dinner. That's how he pronounced it. So I think this ritual is going to stay with us.
Thank you so much, Willa. That was wonderful sharing. And Jeff, by proxy, the wisdom of ongoing action and ritual in your lives. And to Howard. And just unmute yourself if you would.
I am unmuted. So when we first talked about this, I realized that I didn't actually understand what the word mitzvah meant. And it reflects a confusion. I mean, and I see, so when I was getting ready to do this, went to Google Translate. But if I looked at the materials, I'd have seen it there as well, that mitzvah means commandment. But I always thought when I was growing up, if I knew my sense of what mitzvah meant was what someone said in the chat was good deed. And in fact, what I was doing, looked at my Yiddish dictionary to look up the word mitzvah in Yiddish. And the meaning of mitzvah in Yiddish is, the first meaning is commandment and the second is good deed. To me, it's more about doing things not because you're commanded to do them, but just what I think of as, I don't know, a way to live and a moral code. So another thing I did in thinking about this was I looked up the 613 mitzvot because I'd never looked at that before, and I went to JewFAQ.com. Which looks like a pretty legitimate source, and it lists all 613 commandments and has the sources. And just to see where I fit into that. And, I certainly don't fit into the parts having to do with sacrifice and some of the more obscure, some things that are forbidden that I wouldn't really remotely think about doing anyhow. So the three that I picked out, I didn't realize we were doing one, but I'll just say three things that I picked out that I think are a part of my life and precepts for me are, one was not to stand by idly when a human life is in danger, which comes from Leviticus. Another is to give charity according to one's means, from Deuteronomy. And a third, which is more of a vocational thing for me, is not to delay payment of a hired man's wages, which comes from Leviticus. And just to say very briefly and not take up too much time, giving charity has become something very important for me. And I find in difficult times, such as the times we're living in now, and I've been very troubled by what's going on in Eastern Europe, I find that giving charity makes me feel better and gives me a sense that I'm doing something, not to stand by idly when human life is in danger. I wish that there was something more that I could do to protect the lives of people whose lives are in danger in Ukraine, including some members of my family. But and I don't know quite what to do about that, but it's something I believe in, which goes beyond charity. And not to delay payment of a hired man's wages. There's a whole little section of things about that, where if you have a day laborer and you're supposed to pay them before the morning sunrise. And for the last 30 or so years, in my practice of law, I've done employment law. And one of the things I've done is cases involving non-payment of wages. And I found it really interesting and actually very positive that it's one of the commandments not to delay payment of a hired man's wages, or a hired person's wages, I should say. So I was kind of pleased to see that fit in. Anyhow, those are my thoughts on mitzvot.
Thank you so much, Howard. I love the winding path of learning that you went through. And I saw a few people get a good kick out of that Jew FAQ. That I presume some of us, if they haven't already Googled it while you were speaking, will do so after the class. I certainly will. So thank you. And amazing that the mitzvot can connect to both our family lives, like Willa made example of, and our professional lives. How, Howard, how you have been involved in employment law, and how the mitzvot are seeped into our current judicial system also. So I'm going to invite you to turn to page 36 of your books, because we are about to drop some revelation on you. This is the 10 Commandments, not the Charlton Heston version. So this is the passage known as the 10 Commandments, biblically presented as having been revealed by God to the Israelites at Mount Sinai. It is the opening statement, as it were, between God and the Israelites. Thus, it is the foundation of the Jewish conception of revelation. And before we get into these commandments and we actually read them together, analyzing this group of 10 commandments, a few things jump out about Jewish life and practice. The first, the content of revelation is not primarily theological. And this is really important. By theological, meaning telling truths about God, but more about human responsibility and behavior. Rather than telling us too much about God, these 10 commandments mandate action by human beings that is rooted in a relationship with God. Moreover, the content of revelation is not primarily about Jewish belief. Only the first 2 commandments are concerned with belief. Rather, these 10 commandments tell us primarily about practice, what to do and what not to do. The focus on what to do and what not to do reflects the role of practice in Judaism more generally. Jewish life does not rest primarily on faith and belief. It depends on practices that are the container for that faith and belief. These practices are known as mitzvot, and they involve concrete actions and behaviors and rituals. Second, some of the commandments are do's and some of them are don'ts. And those are the different categories of mitzvah. Thou shalt and thou shalt not. Some refraining from certain activities, others about performing certain behaviors. The third is that some of the activities described are simply good human behaviors. So, for instance, respect your parents, don't lie in court, etc. Others focus specifically on respecting God in some way, like not using God's name in vain, keeping Shabbat. These activities can also teach us a lot about the concept of mitzvah in Judaism generally. Some of the mitzvot appear to be what we might call good deeds, which most societies would require, while others of them appear to be more idiosyncratic, ritualistic, and religious. So Howard's, kind of wonder about, well, what does mitzvah actually mean? Well, the beauty of Hebrew is that it encompasses a lot more than just, say, one concept usually. And so we have this mix, and hopefully one of the texts we'll get to today by Maimonides really breaks down some of the different ways that we can understand mitzvot. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to read the Ten Commandments, and then we're going to go into Chavruta and discuss them. And what I'm going to ask you to discuss in Chavruta after this is what surprises you? What surprises you about these mitzvot in your rereading, and which mitzvah or couple of mitzvot of the Ten Commandments most resonates with you? So those are the two questions to kind of preempt our reading. And, we know the Ten Commandments, but I think probably several of us haven't looked at them recently. And always, each time the text comes alive. So let's have somebody read in their best, Moses or God voice, as it were. Leora, happy I got a good laugh out of you there. Who's gonna? Anybody who hasn't read yet for our group? We're 6 sessions in, folks. So you only got a couple more to read in front of this group. We're a very, very, very nice group of people. You just go ahead and
I
unmute.
can do it if you want.
Okay.
I was laughing because Moses' problem with the tongue was his tongue. You see,
Yeah,
that's why.
it's true. Well, no need for the lisp.
Okay. So, you want it in Hebrew or English?
English.
Oh, okay. Okay. God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord. I'm your God, who brought you out the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image, nor any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters under the earth. You shall neither bow down to them nor serve them, for I, the Lord, your God, I'm a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, and showing mercy to the thousandth generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold guiltless the one who takes God's name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but seventh day is a Shabbat to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you, nor your son, daughter, male or female slave, cattle, or the stranger is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and God rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Shabbat day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long on the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male or female slave, nor his ox, or his ass, nor anything that is your neighbor.
Thank you. So again, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and and you're going to have 10 minutes. Talk about 10 minutes. Talk about what surprises you of these on this rereading, and which one do you and which one resonates with you most. And you can head to your breakout rooms and people are on their way back. Oh, you're on mute. Brooklyn, you're on mute.
Brooklyn, I clicked by mistake.
Yeah, somebody was in the middle of a
I was
sentence.
in the middle of saying I clicked. I didn't want to be rude. But you know, this gives us a chance to say that we're now officially members of JCOGS.
Yes,
Yes,
we joined.
We joined.
That's so cool. Yay.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed the group, so we decided to, make it official.
That's so wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah. Make
Great.
that really
We'll make
great.
That's great. Great to hear.
Yeah, great thing happening here. It's
Thank you.
nice. Yeah. And actually, well, now people are back, so I can't mention this. But
Well, another time soon.
okay.
So, and welcome, Kathy. Good to see you here too. Thanks for jumping in. So,
yeah.
so
That's okay. You felt a
wonderful.
pull.
So we are. I got to hear all kinds of very fun conversations happening. Just give me unmute yourself and in like 4 words, tell me that mitzvah from the 10 Commandments that resonates with you. And let's just hear a few of them that what were the ones that you mentioned in your group.
Honor parents.
Yeah, we never got there, actually.
Ah.
We didn't share ours.
Okay. Any other groups though?
Graven image.
Yeah.
Wave an image. Thank you.
And Rabbi pointed out to us there were 4 comments about the Sabbath. So that's what stood out for me.
Right.
The most important one.
Importance of Sabbath.
What about others?
Well, I want to apologize for leaving our breakout rooms so precipitously. But yeah, we talked about graven images.
Uh-huh.
And we ran out of time.
So I
Sarah?
decided to go out on a limb a little bit and look at the first commandment and why it counts as a commandment, and came up with the idea of God commanding you not to enslave yourself or not to be enslaved, because God has freed us from Egypt and from slavery, and we should live our lives not to feel enslaved by external circumstances.
Wow. Way to go there, Willa.
Can we address the slave idea a little bit? I mean, to your point, maybe we were unenslaved, but there are 2 references, and I'm kind of presuming that it has to do with the translation, but they refer to you having your slave, and your slave shouldn't work. What's the etymology here, Rabbi?
Well, there are a couple of mentions of slaves. The first one is, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So we were once slaves. Don't forget, I'm the one that took you out. You shouldn't have any other gods. I'm the one God. And then later on for Shabbat, the male and female slaves, the avdecha, eved, using that same language of avadim, of slavery, and amatcha, your ama, your female slave or servant, which they did have back then.
But would it be more appropriate, perhaps, to say your servant rather than your slave? I mean,
people translated differently. I don't, English language is tricky, and exactly what these, it may. You use the word slave, and you think about slavery in America, and it was probably quite different than that, but maybe not that different. So, but they were, I've heard some commentary on that we shouldn't translate it as servant, because they weren't servants; they were property. And if you look at the list of what's mentioned here, these are, they're meant. First, you have the children that are mentioned. So your children shouldn't work on Shabbat, but also your slaves. And then look what comes next: your cattle, and the stranger in your gate. I think the slaves and the cattle are in a similar category. Unfortunately, that's the view of an early view of biblical view, to put it frankly. But that's taking us a little bit out of this idea of practice and action that we're supposed to be focused on here. So Sarah?
I mentioned that number 13 has 4 different
commandments in it. Some of the other ones, you had one commandment, but there was more different, like 4 different verses focused on that commandment, and then this one is 4 commandments in a single verse, and they're kind of big things. You know, you should not murder. I don't know. I found that surprising that they were all squished into one.
Yeah, Hillel. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Hi. The difference between love and respect was very important to me. The older I get, the happier I am that my children not only love me, but that they respect me. But my concern is that the elderly and old are often overlooked and unwanted because they're difficult, they're demanding, they're not well. And I think that the commandment to honor is extremely important as we become a much older generation.
I might say the inverse, that it's important for the young generation, not as we get older, but this is really a commandment for the young folks. And the way that their society was built was a lot more a lot more inclusive of different generations under one house, or one tent, as it were.
I thought
Here,
it
here.
came into the commandment also with the do not murder, and it explained that also means not taking away a person's dignity. And that especially applies to older people and more frail people, because nobody values age now. Nobody, I mean, just practically, I know in Quebec, people over 70 do not routinely get certain tests because they're too old. Young 70s, no, don't get it. If you're 70, you're lost. You have to really push for it. And that's part of the do not murder commandment, taking away the dignity of an older person.
Thank you, Gloria. I think this really gets to the heart of our discussion on practice, because the question we're trying to ask is, what are the implications of being a practice-based religion? And I think there's just so much merit. There's so much to be gleaned from it, that the action is to honor and respect elders, and there are countless rabbinic books about how to do that, and more modern commentaries on it, and the will of the heart in knowing how to honor one's elders, and it's not a belief, but a series of daily actions. And yeah, Susan.
When I was in confirmation class, we were asked the same question of which of these commandment resonates. And for me, honoring my parents didn't even have to do with elderly. It's just that I wanted to be good because I loved them so much. I mean, it all stemmed from how much I loved them and respected them. So it's kind of a different take, because that was from a child or a young person point of view.
Well, how many teenagers would go that route, Susan? You may be the exception.
I think so, because
Bobby?
I can remember the same discussion in my confirmation class, and we were actually in a post-confirmation class about to embark on going to college, And the rabbi made some comment about don't drag your parents further past the tree than they drag their father. I don't, there must be some saying, but and then I thought about 1969, 1970, don't trust anyone over 30. So where did that fit in with honor your parents in this questioning and rebelling or separating? But can you honor your parents without following everything? How do you honor your parents? Yes. Yeah. And I think actually one other thing, I think I was reversing it too as I read it and thinking about the iniquity of parents. So what about parents who didn't really give their children a very strong Jewish education? It was sort of Jewish as we talk about it. Because I started thinking back to my own family and maybe we could have done a better job.
Yeah, I don't think that precludes the honoring of one's parents.
Yeah.
But there certainly.
I don't think that.
So I want to take us. Sarah, you get the last thought on the Ten Commandments.
I was just following on from what Bobby was saying. I don't think that honoring one's parents necessarily means doing everything that one's parents do and in the way one's parents do it, because if that were the case, I mean, I think you can respectfully disagree with the way your parents do it. And how would you ever get back on the right track if you didn't do things differently from your parents? How would you learn things? How would you move forward?
So the Hebrew word for honor and respect comes from the word weight. So kaved is kaved et avicha v'et imecha is so I like to think of it as put some weight to what your parents are telling you, teaching you, which doesn't mean that they get a veto by a certain age of what you get to do or not do, and the choices you make, but to give serious weight to what they have taught you, in addition to making sure that they're taken care of. Page 38. This is from Babylonian Talmud Makot, and we're going to read this passage that talks about the kind of full scope of the network of mitzvot. I think it was maybe Eli or someone wrote 613 in the chat box, and we're going to talk about, well, how did we get to this 613? And there's because it's a little bit, it's an interesting question, and there's just Judaism has so much quantity to it, right? There's so much to it, and there's no greater book of quantity in Jewish practice than the Talmud. The Talmud, which we're about to read this section of, which originated with two different books, one from Babylonia, one from land of Israel, and it's the kind of central corpus of rabbinic tradition, which, as we've talked about before, it's organized around this oral law of the Mishnah, the first oral law that was written down after the temple's second destruction, but it branches off from there. So some of the key ideas that we're going to be looking at in this text are how rabbinic tradition begins to quantify the practices described in the Torah itself. Where in the Torah does it say, follow the 613 mitzvot? It doesn't say that anywhere, right? That comes up in rabbinic tradition afterwards. The rabbis enumerate more than 600 practices or mitzvot. This number itself gives a sense of the centrality and ubiquity of practice in Jewish thought. And there's also a sense of comprehensiveness suggested by having the number correspond, as we'll see, to what it corresponds to. And there are positive and there are negative mitzvot. So let's have a volunteer read this in English, if you would, source 2. Let's go for it. Just unmute yourself.
Rabbi Simlai expounded 613 commandments, mitzvot, were told to Moses. 613 negative, don't do X, commandments corresponding to the days of the solar calendar, and 248 positives, do X, commandments corresponding to the limbs of a person. Rav Hamuna said, what scripture supports this? Moses commanded us the teachings, Torah, an inheritance, Deuteronomy 33. The word Torah, teaching, in numerology is 611. The first 2 commandments, I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other God before me, we hear directly from God rather than from Moses. Thus, 613.
All right, so the many a rabbi have spilled a lot of ink on how do we get to the exact number of 613. And if you look at different, especially medieval rabbis, the way that they count a mitzvah or don't count a mitzvah, and some of you were probably quite perplexed when you got to the first commandment. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Okay. How is that a commandment? So here it gets explained in 2 different ways. One, that the negative commandments correspond to the solar calendar, 365, and the positives correspond to the limbs of a person. So the second understanding is that that Hamnuna gives is that the Torah adds up to 611. There's this Jewish understanding, gematria, that each letter corresponds to a number. So if you add it up, the Tav is 400, the Vav is 6, the Resh is 200, the Hey is 5, and you get 611, and that were given to Moses. And then you have these 2 commandments, the first 2 commandments of the 10 commandments that were actually given directly from God rather than given from Moses. If we take a step back for a second, right, and try to understand what are they getting at by connecting, not getting into the weeds too much about how you add up to 613 exactly, but looking at it on a kind of mythical level, on a kind of meaning-based level. How do we come to understand the significance that they're attributing to the commandments? By connecting them to 1, the solar calendar, 2, parts of our body, and 3, the word Torah itself, both given to Moses, and this understanding that some commandments, especially these 2, were given by God's self and not through a conduit. What's your impression of these significances? Other than, wow, these guys are really creative mathematicians.
I think they're saying that the Torah is something, and the way that you observe the Torah is something that's woven into your everyday life, into your physical body every day. Even though it has a high connection, it's not a rare thing. It's part of life.
Yeah. So in which connecting it to all of these, or were you thinking specifically about one or two of them?
I guess I was thinking the search for having it add up to things like the days of the year, or why you would want to correlate it with limbs or things like that.
Mm-hmm. So the mitzvot are deeply embedded in the structures of life, whether it's the calendar we base our lives on, or our actual like physical bodies.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, I think it's powerful to think of things that the commandments that we cannot do. I think that's an interesting concept. Very often in making life decisions, or if we're searching for something, sometimes it is said that it's easier to define something that you don't want, or that you're clear that you don't want to do. And it's an interesting take on a commandment, that it's something that you have to withhold yourself from or think about that you shouldn't do. And I think there's some wisdom in that. I have to think about it more.
Right. I often think of the negative commandments as a kind of stop check in life, like, and it adds an extra level of intentionality.
Yes.
We're not animals only. We're not just do this, do that, do whatever we want. We have to stop, pause. What are we putting in our mouths?
Right.
How are we driving down the road? More, a certain intentionality, like you. Yeah.
Well, and I think that too, that it's harder often to do the intentionality of not doing, like someone once said to me that they thought that it's easier to go buy a Prius than it is to commit to stop using certain kinds of plastics in some ways. Like you can go and say devote resources to doing this thing that you feel is a positive thing, but to actually intentionally deprive yourself of something feels different.
And it may very well be why there's only like 14 million Jews in the world. It's not an easy religion. It's not there's a lot of don't do's along the way, and maybe I'm getting to the sociology too much, but I do there is a there's a way in which the thou shalt not do's, which amount to a significant amount more than the thou shalt do, add up in one's life.
One of the biggest don't do's, don't work on the holy day, is a universal now, though. Everybody has. No, I don't want to say everybody, but it feels like the work week and the idea that there's a 7-day week with at least one day of rest is a big thing, and that's more than just 14 million Jews. That's something that has become global in scope.
That's interesting. It certainly has taken off. Modern society has tried to curb that a little bit, but with an enthusiasm for work and productivity. But let's go to this next text, because we've got some more juicy text to get to, and I want to just look at this Maimonides text, which I think this is our third time exploring Maimonides, Guide for the Perplexed, and this talks about the purpose of the mitzvot. So we've looked at some of the, we've looked at the 10, mitzvot. We've looked at kind of a framing of the whole scope of mitzvot, adding up to 613. Now we're looking at like what's the why behind it, where it doesn't always say in the Torah why you should do the mitzvot, and there are all kinds of categories. And Maimonides, this 12th century rabbi, breaks it down for us on why Jewish life places a central focus on action, and really gets to the idea of why the connection between action and faith. And he offers some responses to this question in what's the relationship between action and faith, in suggesting that the system of mitzvot have three goals. Each goal that he enumerates represents a partial response to the question of how action and faith are related to one another. And you can think about your own lives, like how your actions and faith are connected to each other as we read this. First, he suggests that being involved in Jewish practice will shape one's beliefs. Talked about that earlier. Based on this approach, the mitzvot serve to buttress faith rather than detract from the centrality of faith. They are vehicles for shaping and maintaining faith. So that's his first response. The second is that he explains that the goal of many mitzvot is to create a well-ordered society. So now Maimonides is the sociologist, that the mitzvot create a well-ordered society. Think, thou shalt not murder, right? Jewish faith serves Jewish practice rather than the other way around. A life of faith should lead to concrete good in the world. Thus, mitzvot are an end in and of themselves. And the third piece, he describes that the goal of some mitzvot is to inculcate good character. In this case, it is not faith, but goodness that is the goal. Once again, a life of faith should lead to goodness. Maimonides asserts that goodness is not cultivated merely through thought, but also through action. And to attain and or maintain all of these three things, good beliefs, good society, and good character, one needs concrete actions. So would somebody be willing to read this text in English?
Sure, I'll read it. The Guide for the Perplexed. Every one of the 613 precepts serves to inculcate some truth, to remove some erroneous opinion, to establish proper relations in society, to diminish evil, to train in good manners, or to warn against bad habits. All this depends on three things: opinions, morals, and social conduct. We do not count words because precepts, whether positive or negative, if they relate to speech, belong to those precepts which regulate our social conduct, or to those which spread truth, or to those which teach morals. Thus, these three principles suffice for assigning a reason for every one of the divine commandments.
All right, so sometimes, as always, Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed sometimes makes us a little more perplexed. But he's all that, isn't that the nature of going into truth? It sometimes gets more confusing. So reactions. What do you think, Maimonides? Do you think that the mitzvot are indeed trying to shape faith, society, and character? What do you think religion's purview should be?
I definitely agree with that. I'm wondering whether there's a ranking. We were talking in our group earlier a little bit about, diminish evil and train yourself in good manners seem like there does seem there should be some hierarchy there. And I'm wondering if there is indeed some kind of hierarchy of ones that are really important and ones that are somewhat less important.
I would certainly think that Maimonides would say so. where do you, what about your own lives? When do your actions condition your beliefs, and when do your beliefs shape your actions? Just kind of delving into this question a little further. What's the chicken and what's the egg?
It's a little hard to answer that because it changes over time. I mean, when you're younger, going back to the honoring mother and father, when you're younger, you're given certain rules. Just like when you're a young person, there's certain commandments that you follow because you don't really have any context in which to make choices. You're just sort of, you're born as a completely open slate. And as you grow and you maybe follow and do some of the commandments and think about it, you have to decide if it makes sense in your life. And you may reinterpret what some of the meaning of some of the commandments are. So I think it's kind of it's a dynamic thing that goes action to belief and then belief to action, up and back over time.
And to your example, Will, of Friday nights, and you can imagine, and you saw it in that how your kids' friends responded to it. How action leads us to certain kind of set feelings, beliefs, emotions, the way we conduct ourselves in the world. How would your children be if you didn't have that Friday every week for 37 years, which, by the way, is amazing because I didn't think you were that old. But so I'm going to turn it over to Barbara because we absolutely have to get to this last text that she sent out earlier. And Barbara, you can unmute yourself and.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Feels like this discussion could go on for a while. When Rabbi David and I met in August to plan this, we had 8 sessions and there were 4 sections: peoplehood, faith, practice, and ethics. But one was the introductory session. So every section had 2 classes and we chose only one for practice. And I'm thinking back to that moment and I'm thinking, wow, we could really be talking about this a while longer. So to be continued. So today I shared a text from Rabbi Rami Shapiro. Rabbi Rami Shapiro, I'll just put a little bit of his bio in the chat box. Very interesting rabbi with interesting kind of worldview of thoughts, a very interesting background. He's an award-winning author of over 36 books on religion and spirituality. He received rabbinical ordination from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, and holds a PhD in religion from Union Graduate School. He was a rabbinic chaplain with the Air Force for 3 years, a congressional rabbi for 20, and a professor of religious studies for 10. And he has a very unique approach that values the mystic heart of all religions. And about 15 years ago, I got a hold of his book, Minyan, 10 Principles for Living a Life of Integrity, which made a big impression on me. And I'll share the sheet as I sent out the PDF. He reworked the 10 Commandments into 10 vows, which was a really nice way to make them more intentional, I think, and more accessible. And he offers them as a way to offer daily affirmations of spiritual intent. So what you're getting is an abridged version of the vows, and we offer them as a way to incorporate them into all of our personal practices of Judaism. So I'm just going to share the screen. 1 minute. Sorry. I told Rabbi David for the next pandemic, God forbid, I'll become a specialist in all of this technology. And he said, may it never be so. Okay. So we'd like to ask someone to read them. You can just unmute yourselves and then we'll discuss them. So if anybody would like to read, starting from the Yud He Vav He, as a way of saying Adonai. Anyone like to read?
Barbara, do you want us to read one at a time and pause or go through it? What's
You know what? Maybe whoever starts can read, 3 or 4 or whatever feels comfortable, and then let the next person go.
All right, I'll do that just to get it going.
Mm-hmm.
Yud He Vav He, the unnamed and unnameable reality is God, the source and sustenance of all being and becoming. Yud He Vav He cannot be imagined and must not be imagined. I vow to practice meditation as a means of emptying the mind of thought and image and thereby awakening to God. Do not misuse religion or spirituality by taking God in vain. I dedicate myself to humility in matters of the spirit, recognizing that at best I glimpse but an infinitesimal slice of the infinite whole. I'll pause there.
Remember the Sabbath and set it apart, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful living. I vow to cultivate Shabbat as a weekly day of mindfulness and attention, setting it aside for rest, renewal, reflection, and recreation. Honor your mother and your father. I vow to promote the well-being of all elderly people, doing what I can to honor and respect both aging and the aged, and seeing in the old a repository of wisdom and experience necessary for right living and a healthy and honorable society. Anybody else? I'll keep going.
Keep going, Kathy.
Okay, I'll keep going. Do not murder. I recognize that murder refers not only to the literal taking of life, but to the killing of dignity. I vowed to practice gentleness and respect toward all, learning how to struggle for what is right without falling prey to what is wrong. Do not engage in sexual misconduct. I vowed to cultivate sexual responsibility and not to engage in sexual relations without compassion and commitment. I vowed to honor my body and the bodies of others by treating all beings with respect and dignity. Do not steal. Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, theft, and oppression, I vow to practice acts of loving kindness towards all things. I vow to practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those in need. Do not lie. I vow to cultivate compassionate speech and attentive listening. I will refrain from uttering words that cause needless division or discord, and I will make every effort to reconcile differences peacefully and resolve all conflicts, however small. Do not covet. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I vow to cultivate ethical eating, drinking, and consuming to promote both personal and planetary well-being. I vow to live simply, to enjoy what I have before seeking to have more, and to labor for that which I desire honestly and justly. I vow to honor the differing gifts of people and to respect the property of others, seeing in others' success inspirational lessons for my own efforts. Wow.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you,
You're
Susan.
welcome. Wow.
Kara wants to share? Oh, no.
Oh, no, I was just doing twinkle fingers.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what we wanted to do in the last 10 minutes that we have is ask you, after studying our sources today and hearing these interpretations from Rabbi Shapiro into the 10 vows, do you have any thoughts about your own capacity or interest in committing to a mitzvah or mitzvot? And is there something you're working on in your life, or a personal goal you're working on, and that you think that practicing a mitzvah in any of these ways might help you with? I'll leave them on the screen because I don't know if everybody printed them out. I'll make them a bit smaller. Oops.
Well, I love the idea, and of course, I don't know why it didn't really occur to me. I love the idea that one could pick one thing and work on it, and I'm not sure why that doesn't necessarily occur to me. But when you say that, I was like, oh, of course, you can pick one thing. You know, the thing that resonates with me, partly this is a result of some of the studying that I did for my bat mitzvah, is of course thinking about how to cultivate Shabbat as a weekly day of mindfulness and attention. And I love the idea. I love the way that this is phrased, and I like the idea of thinking, you know, what would that look like if you took a year and said, I'm going to really try to focus on like one thing, not to try to say I have to do everything.
Good point. It is very freeing to think of one. Anybody else?
I will say for myself, do not murder. I work with adolescents, 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds on a daily basis, and not the literal taking of life, but the killing of dignity is a daily occurrence in my job. And both the kids that I work with, some days it's a child, some days it's a young adult that you never know really what you're going to get, minute by minute even. Makes it a big challenge, especially right now this year, a really big challenge to allow people to experience the dignity and to feel like they can do things and feel capable and competent, and to feel safe emotionally, when so many really dangerous, egregious, violent behaviors are going on, in our, 22 to 25 people, in our classroom. It's very, very hard to create a place where people are not metaphorically murdering each other. And there's great misery and sorrow in a lot of what I do. And to really practice this, and to practice gentleness and respect, and struggle for what's right without falling prey to what's wrong, to take the easy, cheap shot, is something on a daily and a minute by minute basis that I struggle with, and that I watch people struggle with, and that I really try and model the best of. That is such a true interpretation for me.
Thank you.
Susan, were you going to say something?
No, but there's a lot to think about. Like, I'm thinking about the value of meditation, and I don't think about God necessarily, but I think when I empty my mind, there's an opportunity for some truth and understanding to emerge that I couldn't access in another way.
I'm going to mention or think about the do not covet, and in particular, the notion of vowing to live simply. And in particular, Jeff and I are now going through a process of decluttering and getting rid of a lot of stuff. And having lived in our house for 35 plus years, we have a lot of junk that is just weighs us down. And the notion of living simply is something to keep front and center, because that may actually make that whole process of transition a lot easier.
Beautiful.
I really thought that the Rabbi Shapiro's vows and the way he's expanded on the commandments, I thought that was really excellent. And I like the way he turned things around, the do nots, turn things around to say, this is what I vow to do. And also being more expansive on some of them. I mean, I hadn't thought about, I mean, the whole do not murder, the idea about dignity. It was, I mean, all of them, I think it brought more, it was more all encompassing. And one of the things that I was thinking is that I was also inspired by Willa, by your Friday night. And I'd love to be able to do more with Friday nights with my kids. And I'd love to be able to share this, for example, with them and, you know, start a discussion with them. I don't know whether, how they would, you know, how well that would go down. But I certainly, yeah, I'm inspired by what you did.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the elucidation. I mean, you know, some of the questions that were raised on the original version with some of the terminology and the etymology and where did the, you know, what are these, you know, terms sort of translated in a, you know, in a historical context sometimes could be viewed differently. I think what he's done here is to elaborate. What does it mean that, you know, thou shouldn't murder? Yeah, okay, you're not supposed to take a gun and shoot somebody, but the broader context of you know, of dignity, of maintaining you know, of gentleness and respect for all is a much broader, but frankly more applicable to day-to-day life than the idea of not killing somebody. So I think this is a very you know, worthwhile updating of rephrasing to something that is germane to the way we think and do today. It's not just one; it's the whole enchilada.
Thank
You know,
you.
as I was looking at these, the principles, I was trying to distinguish between the precepts that sort of interface with the larger society, such as do not covet, do not steal, do not murder, you know, not just literally, but, you know, I feel that increasingly trying to have a life of integrity, meaningful life of integrity is becoming sort of increasingly difficult given sort of larger currents. So I was thinking, well, what can one actually do? What can one actually have some sort of control over? And I know Rachel's been saying many times, she's tried many times to really make you know, Shabbat something important and to set that time aside and to have dinner. And the kids just they haven't really gone for it. So I was actually quite inspired by you know, successful sort of Shabbat practices. And, you know, it does seem like that is something very meaningful that one can do within the space of the family and the family unit to really sort of like, you know, acknowledge, you know, this sort of sacred time and sacred space. So that's something that, you know, we're going to try to do. And because with a lot of these other ones, one just has, at least I feel an increasing sense of futility and despair. So
Thank you. And I think just to conclude, thank you all for sharing, and thank you to Howard and Willa for kicking us off this conversation, and Barbara for bringing this amazing Rami Shapiro text. And if you don't know his writings, please jump right in, get one of his books and start reading. In action, we need to have a long view that our habits that we build take a long time to seep in. So lest we start glorifying Willa and Jeff for having the perfect Friday night dinner, I know enough about them that their kids gave them plenty of tsuras, gave them plenty of trouble along the way. So, but look at the fruits that they've borne over time. So here we are. We're going to conclude here. The mitzvot are defined as commandments and as Jewish practice and as good deeds and all of that. Many ways to organize them, the over 600 of them. Some that take place between people and God, some connected to time, connected to body, some positive, some negative. And there are many ways to understand them. And we learned a few of those ways tonight. We talked about a few. They help shape and maintain faith. They help create a well-ordered society. They require action. So they bring about good character traits in humanity. So pass it back to Barbara to take us home with some announcements.
Okay, sorry. So our next session is April 11th. Make a note because we did change the date. So it's April 11th, and we'll be moving into ethics, and we'll be discussing environmental ethics. And the last date is, I think, May 2nd. I included that in the email today. Rabbi David has asked me to create a survey to send out to the group as we conclude this learning cohort. So I'm just wondering if anybody out there has experience with surveys and wants to volunteer to help me out with that. Just send me an email. That would be appreciated.
And I'll just say it's both to, for you all to offer feedback as we come to conclude the course over the next 2 months, but also to think about, we have scratched the surface on this Hartman curriculum that we now have, that JCOGS has in our possession, and wanting to do a lot more learning in the years to come, and want to know what was successful about this course, and also what we might learn together in the future, what you're interested in. So if you want to have a stake in helping to get the those right answers that we need, then reach out to Barbara.
Thank you. It would be very much appreciated. And in today's email, we also included 2 more podcasts, and we hope that you're finding those enriching, and sometimes it might even be more interesting to listen to them after the session. It might resonate a little bit more. That's it. We'll see you on April the 11th. I'll leave it to Rabbi David to finish up.
Be well, everyone, and all good things. Hope you'll join us for Purim.
Leora Adler raised her hand.
Yes, well, it's just a sample question. I would like to know why you record this session.
Well, for instance, we have one of our cohort members who had to have a small procedure today and couldn't make it. So we're going to share the recording with them.
Okay, it's each time you have to share with her?
Nope, just today. She had a procedure and she was too tired to make it to the session. So
thank you.
It doesn't go anywhere beyond those.
Well, I'm asking because where we go now, everybody's record for.
Yeah. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Shavua tov. Bye-bye.
Shavua tov.
Yeah.
Barbara?
Hi there.